When you think of the Hells Angels, you think of brotherhood, courage, and loyalty. You think of angels forever, forever angels. But not this time.
I never felt no brotherhood there. None.
This time they betrayed their own brother and threw him to the dogs. A man who moved from state to state trying to join this mighty club. A man who even parted ways with his own son for the sake of his club. This man took bullets for this club and was a member of the filthy few. And for what?
Well, you know, Peewee is a likable guy, but there's something about at first, with me, it didn't go off real well.
He had climbed the ladder to become the president of the Las Vegas Hells Angels chapter before his own club turned on him. He was excommunicated and left for dead. Yet all he ever wanted was to be a Hells Angel.
You want to be a Hells Angel? I said, yes, I do. You willing to go to prison? You may have to kill somebody. You may get killed. You good with that? And I says, I'll do whatever I got to do, man, you know?
And after all was said and done, he was kicked out bad. How did that happen? And were the Hells Angels justified in kicking him out of the club despite his immense contribution to its success? Or was there some underhand dealing, a scheme to stave off competition that motivated his ouster?
Some believe he was set up for failure. Others believe he deserved everything that came his way. But here at Biker Chronicles, we will let you be the judge.
This is his story. From his wrestling days to his ruthless encounters with the Outlaws and Mongols MC. Buckle up. It's about to go down. The Outlaw Dream. This story begins the same way all outlaw stories begin, with a father abandoning his family. And for Charles Peewee Goldsmith, that's exactly what happened. Even before he stepped foot in the world, his father already wanted nothing to do with him. He was a traveling carnival wrestler. His thrill came from knocking people out. And when his light shone brighter and a beautiful damsel fell on his knees, he knocked her up. Well, not literally. She got pregnant and gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. But immediately Charles Peewee Goldsmith was born, his father disappeared into thin air. Now it was him and his mother against the world. And from that point onwards, he would spend the rest of his life looking for a male camaraderie, a father figure to guide his path. And he would one day find it in the not-so-conventional world, the outlaw motorcycle world. But meanwhile, Milwaukee would be his home for all of his childhood. It was a calm, cool town.
Back then, Milwaukee was considered as the most German of American cities, not just from the large number of German immigrants it received, but for the sense of community which the immigrants established here.
It was a brotherhood town, and Charles Peewee Goldsmith was here for it. Growing up in Wisconsin was a smooth sail in contrast to his adulthood. He joined high school, fell in love, got his firstborn daughter in his senior year. You know, the usual fillers of life. Then he married his wife Dale, and they immediately got a second-born son. He was what most would consider an ideal citizen. But then his father's genes kicked in, and he followed in his footsteps. He became a kickboxer.
Out in the first round.
Watch out, kickboxing world. Milwaukee's about to unleash the locomotive on you.
He was at the top of the world. He was the big fish, but his dream was bigger. He didn't just want to be a wrestler. He wanted to be a real-life gangster, and the Hells Angels had always been at the back of his mind. But there was a problem. The Hells Angels did not have a charter in Wisconsin. And so he went for the next best option, a little-known MC club in the bushes of Wisconsin made up of a bunch of 8 guys. The Sinners MC. They had no clubhouse. They had no money. In fact, their dues were only $10 a month. But when Charles Peewee Goldsmith joined them, the Sinners MC quickly grew in numbers. He was a man of the people. They embraced him as much as he embraced them. Charles's family became their family. They would even have family cookouts every Sunday. Everyone in the club agreed to let Charles be the president, and he took the mantle head on. Fueled by big ambition, Peewee transformed the small Sinners crew. He drew in new members, building a powerful presence. But then, just before he could enjoy the fruits of his labor, the bullies came knocking. Peewee's rise had caused jitters in the underworld. There was a new rising star. And so the dominant outlaw club, the Outlaws MC, began feeling threatened.
away from them. In Milwaukee, there's only Outlaws. That's the only 1% club.
The Sinners were growing quite fast, and they needed to be stopped. So on one fine day, the Sinners MC had organized an eat-out.
I came up with a great idea of really making money, talking serious money for the club. It wasn't selling guns and drugs or broads, you know what I mean? It was a party.
The entry ticket to the all-you-can-eat party was only $40. That wasn't unreasonable, right? Members came in numbers with their families to enjoy the meals. But then a new group joined them too. It was 40 Outlaws MC members. Except they weren't going to pay for it. When halted at the gate and requested to pay $40 like everyone else, they stormed in guns blazing. And Sinners MC had to oblige.
When a big 1%er biker gang comes into play and, subsumes a lesser club, what happens is that you're either going to pledge your allegiance to the bigger gang or you're going to suffer the consequences.
Peewee's pride wouldn't let him bend the knee. I mean, he had just won the championship of kickboxing the previous year. He stood his ground and requested the Outlaws to leave.
I'm thinking, I'm not going to let these Outlaws run me out of town.
A fight erupted where Peewee brawled hard. But he had brought swords to a gunfight. An outlaw held a gun to his head and told him to bend his knee and hail the mightier club. Peewee stood his ground and the Outlaws MC backed down, but the spirit of the Sinners MC had been broken. That was the last time the Sinners ever gathered around again. They downed their tools and kissed Peewee goodbye. The brotherhood had become too hot to handle, and Peewee's dream had come crashing down. His baby club had abandoned him even before they launched.
This is when I knew it was the beginning of the end.
In 1991 at Humboldt, Iowa, for the very first time, Charles Peewee Goldsmith came face to face with a real Hells Angels. It was a bike race party held by the Hells Angels.
Like a deer in headlights, man. I saw him smoking that cigarette, man. Big, broad-shouldered dude. You could tell he was a man, you know what I mean? And I went, look at that patch.
And against his better judgment, despite all the horror stories he had heard about the Hells Angels, he decided to approach him. He asked only one question: "How can I join you?" And the Hells Angel answered in 4 words: "Come where we are." And that's exactly what Charles did.
We moved the day of my high school prom. That was the day of my senior prom. We moved.
In 1992, he moved his whole family from Milwaukee to Minnesota. His goal was to prospect for the Hells Angels chapter there.
When I first started my adventure to be a Hells Angel, it was in Minneapolis with Pat Matter.
The initiation was harsh. Peewee was hazed constantly and forced to prove loyalty through menial tasks. Club president Pat Matter made things especially tough, viewing the hulking Peewee as a threat. He was subjected to a lie detector test.
And he lays it on me. "We want you to take a lie detector test." What did you just say?
If they failed that lie detector test, they was gone.
Is your name Charles Goldsmith? Yes. Do you want to hurt the Hells Angels and their families in any way? No. Are you a cop? No. Have you ever testified against somebody for the prosecution? Yeah, this is all I asked you.
Fortunately, he passed with flying colors, but just after joining the Hells Angels as a prospect, tensions flared as the Hells Angels tried expanding into outlaw states. A biker war erupted across the Midwest. Peewee himself found his name on an outlaw hit list. 3 Hells Angels were killed just in Peewee's first prospecting year amid the escalating turf war. And then in-house wars began. The blame game was on, and guess who was the biggest casualty?
I don't know that Peewee's size had anything to do with it, but I did think he talked too much.
Pat Matter, the Minnesota Hells Angels president, put all the blame on Charles Peewee. So much so that he subjected him to a second lie detector test, which, conveniently, Charles failed miserably. Why? All because he was rising too fast within the realms of the Hells Angels, Minnesota chapter. Pat rejected Peewee's membership, deeming him untrustworthy.
He said, "Hey, Charlie, you're just not cutting it."
But the devastating rejection only fueled Peewee's hunger to prove his worth elsewhere. Rejected but undeterred, Peewee crossed paths with iconic Hells Angels leader Sonny Barger at the annual Sturgis rally. Barger's welcoming wisdom resonated, keeping Peewee's admission dream alive. He uprooted his family once again from Minnesota and moved them to California with one goal in mind: prospecting for the Hells Angels once more.
Fate intervened when Peewee struck up a bond with the San Francisco Hells Angels chapter. There he was finally accepted and earned his patches in the early 2000s after years of turbulent prospecting.
As a prospect, you do have to be on call 24/7 for the club. Club comes first.
However, turf clashes with the Mongols' rival gang soon erupted on the West Coast too.
But I was for Hells Angels. I wanted to see the club grow.
A shootout at the 2002 Laughlin, Nevada biker rally left one of Peewee's buddies badly wounded by gunfire.
He's got a sheet across him, and he's got his thumb in this hole like this. It was a 44 mag he was shot with.
He took the guy to a hospital, made sure he was safe before fleeing the scene after the hospital notified the police about the gunshot wound. Seeing Las Vegas as prime territory to solidify the Hells Angels' foothold in his own legacy, he decided to set up a charter there. The Vegas years.
He's like, come on, I'm gonna start a charter.
Determined to plant roots in the lucrative Vegas underworld, Peewee spearheaded efforts to establish a new Hells Angels charter in the city in the early 2000s.
But he faced immediate opposition from local law enforcement, determined to prevent a Hells Angels foothold.
We don't want any Hells Angels in Las Vegas.
Detectives like Doug Pearson and Annie McDermott aggressively surveilled and targeted the new crew.
The Hells Angels were there the day they opened their charter in Las Vegas.
Meanwhile, Peewee carefully negotiated with the Italian mob, led by notorious Vegas capo Frankie Citro. An agreement was struck, allowing the Hells Angels to operate, but barring them from drug running, prostitution, and other rackets.
As president, Peewee claimed he instituted strict rules prohibiting such illicit activities out of a sensible need to coexist. But frequent police raids challenged Peewee's assertion of a clean club on his watch.
And while he was trying to fight off the mob on the one side and the police on the other side, the Mongols were on his back, quite literally. In one drive-through, while he was with his wife cruising around, a Mongol appeared out of nowhere and shot him through the car's window. While the bullet was not fatal, that was the seal that brought his marriage close to the tipping point. His wife gave him an ultimatum: to leave the club or to leave her alone. But angels forever, forever angels. And just before the dust settled, his son's wedding became the next battlefield, a line that was never meant to be crossed. Like all sons who look up to their father, Peewee's son was no different. He wanted to be like his father. It was a classic case of damned if you do and damned if you do not. But being a loving father, he allowed his son to join the club as a prospect. And just 2 years down the line, his son came with a request. He wanted to marry his high school sweetheart. No big deal, right?
And I just start throwing the punches. Big old buck knife falls on the floor. I hit like a mule. So if I'm 450, you're getting a 450-pound punch to your face.
I turned and I looked and I saw my dad, and he had blood all over his face.
Except the wedding was going to be a blood-soaked event that no one saw coming. A Mongol had decided to attend the wedding.
One of the guys walks up to me and he says, "Peewee, the Mongols are here."
Was it out of curiosity? Who knows? Maybe he wanted to show Peewee that the Mongols are not afraid to cross the line. Maybe they thought Peewee would back down if he saw his family's life was in danger. But little did they know they were messing with the wrong Hells Angel. Right in the middle of the wedding, after the vows had been exchanged and the groom had kissed the bride, Charles did the unthinkable. He confronted the Mongols member and all hell broke loose. The two gangs dealt blows with each other. Peewee himself was bloodied as he traded blows defending the Hells Angels' honor at his own family ceremony. The sheer audacity of the Mongols disrupting his son's sacred celebration enraged him. All he could think was, "Not at my son's wedding." Overriding all reason, He tore into the rivals with his bare fists in front of horrified loved ones. A day of celebration had been turned into a blood-soaked event. His son couldn't take it anymore. To him, his father had gone too far. And from that point henceforth, he and his son would never talk again.
The explosive chapel fight proved a referral point for law enforcement seeking any excuse to dismantle Peewee's charter, and a massive police raid and sweeping arrests soon followed.
The cops come calling. In the wake of the chapel fight disaster, SWAT teams descended on Peewee's home. Facing an array of charges, he bonded out but critically violated club bylaws by cooperating with police and prosecutors.
Seen as compromising the strict code of silence, Peewee was summarily excommunicated from the very club he gave everything to build and protect in Vegas. His betrayal, seen as outrageous, the Hells Angels not only stripped Peewee of the presidency and patch, but blackballed him altogether as a rat in ultimate disgrace.
The painful banishment was compounded by Peewee's imprisonment on multiple convictions. As he served upwards of 5 years, even his wife Dale abandoned their marriage, blindsided by his outlaw life's toll. Everything had come crumbling down. 3 years later, he was released from prison. Emerging as an outcast, the harsh realities of Peewee's all-consuming Hells Angels obsession became clear. The very brotherhood he'd revered and sacrificed everything for now wanted nothing to do with him. His immediate family, too, was fragmented beyond repair. His daughter, Brenda, understood the lifestyle having toughened up as collateral damage. But his son, Brad, disowned him completely, with his cherished Hells Angels dream shattered alongside his nuclear family. Peewee was truly alone for the first time. His unyielding stubbornness had reaped unimaginable losses. Old and broke, the formerly feared Hells Angel shot caller was rendered a decaying shell. His aura of menace vanquished. The outlaw path he'd so recklessly bull-rushed came at too hefty a cost. Peewee's broken home, strained marriage, and severed ties to his own son were the heaviest casualties of his narcissistic quest for belonging within the club's dwindling rebel charm. In the end, idolizing the Hells Angels' chest-puffed version of hypermasculinity only entrenched a vicious cycle of instability and trauma. He had learned a lesson about the Hells Angels. It's not about how much you give them. It's about how much you're willing to take.
Every day was a risk. Every day was a challenge. But I gotta tell you, I don't think Pat wanted me in the Minnesota Angels. I don't know, he just didn't want me around. You know, he always tried to bust my balls in.
His cautionary tale underscores how aggressive posturing and unchecked pride can pervert even the most well-intentioned ambitions when moral compasses get discarded